Adora sat across from Emeka, her smile steady, but her heart uneasy. The room was warm and elegant, with soft jazz curling through the air. Emeka spoke with his usual charm, confident, smooth. But her attention drifted. Something about the way he looked at her tonight felt different. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened, just for a second. "It's work. I need to take this." Adora nodded, watching as he moved briskly up the stairs, phone to his ear. His voice changed. Tense. Controlled. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp. Alone now, she stood to stretch her legs. Her eyes landed on the tall bookshelf in his study. Curious, she walked over. The books were old, some with titles she didn't recognize. She trailed her fingers along their spines, then suddenly something clicked under her touch, a small, metal button, almost hidden. She paused. Then pressed it. A soft click echoed, and the bookshelf parted. Behind it, a bright, sterile room. Her breath caught. Adora stepped forward, cautiously. A sleek steel table stood in the center, too clean. On the side wall, boxes, each labeled. And scattered near them, clothes. Jewelry. A pink scarf. A single flat shoe. Her mind reeled. She stared, frozen, trying to understand. Then, footsteps. Emeka was coming back. Adora jolted into action. She pushed the shelf closed, turned away, and just as she caught her breath, he entered. "You like books?" he asked, his eyes resting on her longer than they should. "Yeah," she replied, voice strained. "Just browsing." He smiled. Too calm. Adora smiled back. But her hands were shaking. She had seen something. And he knew. The ride home was quiet. Adora sat in the back of the cab, staring out the window, but she wasn't seeing the streets. Her thoughts were stuck in that room, those clothes, that scarf, the silence that smelled too clean. Her heart beat fast, even now. Her palms hadn't stopped sweating. She remembered how Emeka had looked at her after he came back into the room. Calm. Smiling. But his eyes had searched her face too long. Like he was waiting for her to slip. To confess with her fear. He knew. Not completely. Not yet. But enough to be dangerous. Back in her apartment, she locked the door twice. Then a third time. She leaned against it and finally let herself breathe. Her phone buzzed. Emeka. Had a great time tonight. Hope you got home safe. She didn't reply. She couldn't. All night, she sat on her couch, trying to think. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe that wasn't what it looked like. Emeka wasn't just dangerous. He was a monster. Adora's fingers hovered over her keyboard, but the words on her screen blurred. She'd been staring at the same email for 15 minutes. Around her, the office buzzed with normalcy, phones ringing, printers humming, coworkers chatting softly. But inside her, everything was tight. Loud. Off balance. She flinched when her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Emeka, "Miss you. Still thinking about your smile." She turned the screen face down. "Hey, Adora?" She looked up, startled. Her boss, Mrs. O'Quiddley, stood at the edge of her desk. Elegant, composed, but her brow furrowed with concern. "You okay?" she asked gently. "You've been off lately." Adora opened her mouth. Closed it. I'm fine, she whispered, forcing a smile. But Mrs. O'Quiddley wasn't convinced. She pulled a chair closer and sat down. You know, your mother and I go way back. If there's something wrong, Adora, you can talk to me. Adora felt her throat tighten. She blinked fast, but her eyes were already wet. It's stupid, she muttered. Try me. And just like that, the words started to come. Not everything. Not yet. But enough, the night at Emeka's, the strange room, the feeling of being watched. Mrs. O'Quiddley listened without interrupting. When Adora finished, she took her hand. You're not stupid, she said firmly. You're lucky to be alive. I have heard stories about situations similar to yours where the victims were less fortunate. Adora's lips trembled. I'm scared. She leaned back, already thinking. Let me make a few calls. For the first time in days, Adora felt something that almost resembled safety. Almost. Because she knew Emeka. He wouldn't let go that easily. Mrs. O'Quiddley's call was brief but serious. The man on the other end didn't ask too many questions, just listened carefully and promised to look into it. His name was Detective Okoro. Discreet. Thorough. Trusted. By the end of the day, he had Emeka's full name, date of birth, business registry, and photographs, clean-cut, smiling, well-dressed. On paper, Emeka was perfect. Too perfect. Meanwhile, Adora tried to act normal. She went to work. Smiled when spoken to. But the pressure built inside her like steam behind glass. Emeka's texts hadn't stopped. You've been quiet. You're not ignoring me, are you? We need to talk. She didn't respond. She didn't block him either. Something told her that would only make things worse. That night, she left the office late and noticed a black car parked across the street. It wasn't familiar, but it also didn't move. Her pace quickened. By the time she reached home, her hands were shaking again. Elsewhere, Detective Okoro sat in his modest office, scrolling through records. Emeka's businesses were all registered, all paying taxes. But the addresses didn't match. The names of partners led nowhere. A few of the listed employees had no trace online. It was all clean. But too clean. He'd seen this kind of ghost money before. He bookmarked the files and leaned back, staring at Emeka's photo. Men like this didn't make mistakes in public. But behind closed doors, that's where the truth waited. Back in her apartment, Adora sat curled up on her couch, every light on. She didn't know someone was already watching over her. And that soon, Emeka's flawless world would start to crack. The next day, Adora woke up to the soft hum of her phone. Her heart skipped when she saw the message. Emeka, I'm not sure where we stand, Adora. Call me. She stared at it for a long moment, hands cold. Her gut twisted as she thought about the hidden room, the clothes, the evidence. She could feel the weight of his gaze even now, like a shadow creeping in on her every step. But she didn't respond. She couldn't. Instead, she buried herself in work, her mind scattered. Even though Detective Okoro had promised her protection, Adora couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every turn. Every phone ring. It was as though Emeka had eyes everywhere. Meanwhile, Detective Okoro's investigation was getting deeper. He had managed to track down one of Emeka's former associates. A man named Uche, who'd worked with Emeka in the past but disappeared without a trace. When Okoro tracked Uche down, he was living under a false name, but he was more than willing to talk. They never let you leave, Uche confessed, his voice shaking. Once you're in for good. Emeka, he runs things under the surface. The businesses are just a front. The real money is in the dark. Uche spoke in fragments, but the detective's mind raced. There it was, the hidden empire Emeka had built. And Uche's warnings hit harder now, you can't escape him. He'll find you. But Okoro wasn't afraid. He had something Emeka didn't, the law. And the law was coming for him. Back in her apartment, Adaora closed the blinds tightly, but the feeling of being trapped stayed. Her heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear, it was the rising anger inside her. She had seen too much. She couldn't go back to pretending that everything was fine. The doorbell rang. Adaora froze. For a split second, she wondered if it was Emeka. He had been showing up unannounced lately, pushing, pressing, watching her like a hawk. But it wasn't Emeka. It was her boss, Mrs. O'Quiddley. "Are you all right?" Mrs. O'Quiddley asked, walking in without waiting for an invitation. The concern in her eyes deepened when she saw Adaora's face. "I know it's been tough, but you're not alone. You're safe, dear." Adaora nodded but didn't speak. She wasn't ready to explain the weight of the situation. Not yet. Then her phone rang again. Emeka. This time, Adaora answered. "Stop," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I'm done playing your game. I see you now, for who you really are." Emeka was silent for a moment, then his voice came through the line, smooth and dangerous. "You think you can walk away from me, Adaora? I know where you are. I know where you'll be." Her blood ran cold. "I'm not afraid of you." There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice almost calm. "We'll see about that." The call ended, but Adaora felt a chill deep in her bones. She had made her decision. There was no going back. Adaora barely slept that night. The fear didn't come in waves anymore, it was constant, gnawing at her every second. The sound of her own breath felt too loud in the silence of her apartment. She got up early, tried to shake off the cold grip of anxiety, but it followed her everywhere. Even the sunlight streaming through her window felt oppressive. Mrs. O'Quiddley had arranged a meeting with Detective Okoro that afternoon. Adaora wasn't sure what to expect, but the urgency in her boss's voice had left her with no choice but to follow through. When she arrived at the detective's office, she was greeted by a quiet sense of purpose. Okoro's office was cramped, filled with files and paperwork, but his eyes were clear, focused. "We've been making progress," he said, motioning to the stack of documents on his desk. "Uche's story checks out. We've connected Emeka to a series of shady transactions. He's running a network of front companies, each one more dangerous than the last." Adaora's throat tightened, but she held herself steady. "So, it's real?" "Yes. It's bigger than we thought." A knock on the door interrupted them. Mrs. O'Quiddley stepped in, her expression hard but resolute. "We're going after him, Adaora. You don't have to carry this alone." Adaora nodded. She felt a flicker of hope, but it was fragile. Emeka wasn't going to give up easily. She knew that. As the detective handed her a file, he looked her in the eye. "You're brave, Adaora. But now, you have to stay strong. The next few days are going to be crucial." Adaora closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply. Emeka didn't contact Adaora for 2 days after their last conversation. 2 days that felt like 2 years. But even in his silence, the threat hung in the air, he was watching. He always was. The detectives' team had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering evidence and making quiet inquiries. Every lead that came in pointed to the same thing: Emeka was untouchable, a shadow in the city's underbelly, moving through a world that no one dared to expose. But they were getting closer. That afternoon, as Adaora sat at her desk, the office phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but her heart skipped anyway. "Hello? Adaora." Emeka's voice was calm, too calm. "I didn't expect you to go this far. You must be tired, running around, playing detective." She couldn't control the shudder that ran down her spine. "I'm not playing," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. "I know what you're doing." There was a pause. Then he chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. "You think you know? You don't know anything." "I know enough," she whispered, her grip tightening on the phone. "And I'm done being afraid of you." "Oh, really?" he said, his voice almost casual now. "We'll see. Just remember, Adaora, I know more about you than you could ever imagine." The line went dead. Adaora's breath caught. Her pulse pounded in her ears. He wasn't just threatening her anymore. He was threatening everything and everyone she loved. But she had come too far now. She wouldn't back down. Detective Okoro stared at the board on his wall: photos, bank statements, shell companies, all connected by red lines that led back to one man, Emeka Okonkwo. The case had dragged on for weeks, but now it was gaining momentum. Uche's testimony had been the key, but what came after was even more damning: offshore accounts, silent partners, and one chilling pattern: every missing girl had, at some point, crossed Emeka's path. Then came the break. A signal from one of their surveillance teams watching Emeka's mansion. "He's brought someone new to the house," the officer reported. "Young woman. Matches the pattern." Okoro's jaw clenched. That was all they needed. Within hours, the judge signed the warrant. The task force assembled quickly. No lights. No sirens. Just quiet boots in the night. They moved in just before midnight. Inside the lavish home, Emeka was in the process of charming the new girl, glass of wine in hand, soft music playing. She laughed nervously, unaware of the danger, unaware of the secret room beneath the house she stood in. Then came the crash. The front door burst open. "Police!" Hands in the air. The girl screamed as Emeka froze, the mask slipping from his face for the first time. The officers swept the house. The hidden room was discovered, just as Adaora had described. Inside, they found more than evidence. They found the personal belongings of all the other victims who never made it out. Emeka didn't speak as they handcuffed him. The silence screamed louder than any words. The nightmare was over. For Adaora, and for the girls who would never suffer at his hands again. The courtroom was silent. Emeka stood before the judge, the cameras flashing from every angle. The world now knew the truth: the businessman with the charming smile, the generous donor, the polished gentleman, was a predator. Detective Okoro sat nearby, watching with calm satisfaction as the prosecution laid everything bare: the hidden room, the trafficking ring, the trail of broken lives. Witnesses testified, Uche among them. The rescued girl from that final night shared her terrifying account through tears. Emeka's defense tried to twist the narrative. They painted him as a misunderstood man, framed by enemies. But it was too late. The evidence was undeniable. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts, a collective breath seemed to be released. Emeka would serve multiple life sentences with no possibility of parole. In the crowd, Adaora closed her eyes. Not out of fear, but relief. She had made it. The weeks that followed felt like waking from a long, terrible dream. She returned to work slowly. Mrs. O'Quiddley remained close, always checking in, never letting her forget that she was safe now. For the first time in months, Adora walked freely. She could breathe again. One afternoon, she stood by the window of her apartment, sunlight on her face. There was no tightness in her chest. No shadow watching from behind. She was free. And Emeka? He was exactly where he belonged. Not every predator hides in the dark. Some smile as they destroy. But this time, one of them didn't get away.